Welcome to this Introduction to Jira Align webinar, everyone. My name is Vicki Murphy. I am a delivery manager and Jira Align subject matter expert with Valiantus, which is a platinum solutions partner with Atlassian. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we do and some services that we offer later on in this presentation. Let's go ahead and jump into what we are going to be talking about today. We're wrapping up the introduction really with this slide. I have a couple more slides to show you to talk about some concepts. I think there's some great visuals to be aware of before we jump into the Jira Align system itself. We will be doing a live demo of the tool, hitting some of the highlights that we find are really beneficial to organizations that utilize Jira Align, and we will wrap up with some Q&A. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, please put them in the Q&A panel in the Zoom. And my colleague Kylie has joined us as well, and she may be answering some of those, providing some links in the chat as well, and will be helping me monitor that Q&A. All right, with that, let's go ahead and jump into our concepts. Starting with the positioning of Jira Align. Jira Align is positioned a bit differently than other Atlassian tools you may be familiar with, like Jira, Confluence, etc. It really is designed for organizations that have implemented or are in the process of implementing a framework for scaled Agile. Some really popular frameworks that we work with are the SAFe framework or the Spotify model. We've also found that organizations are really most successful with implementing Jira Align when they have previously implemented at least one program increment. You may refer to this as a PI or quarterly planning increment. And why we have found success with that model is, first, it is a lot to take on to update or change your process as well as your tools at the same time. That is often asking a lot of your teams, and it may just be easier to spread that out. Additionally, whenever you go into configuring Jira Align, you're going to need to make a lot of decisions about how it's going to be configured for your organization. And those decisions really are based on your process and how you're implementing that process for your organization. So having a bit of that process under your belt and some experience with that can help ease some of that decision making, maybe even speed it up and speed up your implementation time, which could result in lowering your implementation costs as well. If you've ever heard anything about Jira Align, you've heard that it is a large tool, and I'm going to echo that sentiment. It really is a large-scale tool intended for enterprises. Atlassian likes to use the metric that it is intended for organizations that have at least 500 developers. And with it being this larger scale tool, it does have a higher price point than other Atlassian tools like Jira. If you are from a smaller organization and it sounds like you may excuse me, you may struggle with either the size of the tool or potentially the price point, or maybe even both. Don't fret. There's still a lot of great options for you in the Atlassian ecosystem, and I'm going to talk about a really popular one in just a couple of slides. As we will see today, Jira Align really can handle the planning and visualization of our work across our entire enterprise, from our C-suite down to our Agile teams. When we talk about Jira Align, we're really talking about planning at scale. And I like showing this image just briefly because when we talk about planning at scale, there's a lot of moving pieces and it can be a bit chaotic at times. And this is where Jira Align really comes in to help us coordinate and understand this planning across our enterprise. Now let's go ahead and talk about how Jira Align really handles that complexity of Agile at scale. What Jira Align really helps us do is sync our people, the work they do, and time across our enterprise. It really is helping us link our strategy to our execution and back up again. It does this through a variety of layers of scale, and you see those represented over here on the left. And we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive into these in just a moment. Jira Align also offers several modules that can help us with product management, strategic portfolio management, and scale development. And what you'll see is that here down here at the team level, we have a mention of Jira, and this is in reference to Jira software specifically. Jira Align is really intended to layer on top of a team planning tool. Jira software is a really popular one. It can also connect with other team tools such as Azure DevOps. A little bit of background on this. Jira Align used to be called a tool called AgileCraft. And when it was AgileCraft, it was intended to really house the entire organization. Several years ago, Atlassian acquired AgileCraft, turned the tool into Jira Align, and what they found is that their team tool, Jira Software, really had some superior functionality at that team level. And I totally agree with this. Everything from our Agile boards in Jira Software to our flexibility with the JQL filtering, dashboards, add-ons for Jira, and the ability to connect with other team tools like repositories, CI/CD tools, to name a couple, really do lend Jira as a very, very functional tool for our teams. When we start going above that team level, that's where Jira Align really shines. When we are needing to gather that information of multiple teams going into multiple programs, into multiple portfolios, potentially rolling all the way up to our enterprise level, that's where Jira Align is going to help us understand our strategy and how we are executing against that strategy. Now let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into those layers of scale, really focusing on those three hierarchies I mentioned previously: people, work, and time. Again, Jira Align is really great at helping us connect these three entities, thinking of the people that are doing the work that they are doing, and the time boxes they are trying to complete that work in. And which layer of scale that you work at, you're going to have a variety of different options across those three hierarchies. And really what I love about this diagram is, if you're a visual person, thinking of this diagram when we get into the tool, it really does represent how Jira Align is organized and how people interact with Jira Align. Starting with our people over here on the left, we start at the top with our enterprise. And of course, when we're talking about that top layer of scale, we're talking about our strategy. This is going to be that everything from that annual to maybe 5-10 year strategy that our top leaders are setting for our organization. We can then decompose that strategy down into our portfolio and potentially solution layer if it fits for your organization. And at this layer, we're going to be working with our themes. These are those strategic themes. If you're familiar with the SAFe framework, they really represent that high-level strategy that might take a year, maybe a little bit more to complete. And we can decompose that into our portfolio epics or initiatives that might take 1 or more quarters or PIs to complete, and maybe even further into capabilities if we are needing them. We then come down to what we call the program layer, and this is really that team of teams layer. This is where we are executing on our features, and we are trying to complete those features by one team of teams in one program increment. And we break that down further into our team level, that agile team level, where we're working on stories and tasks. And this is where we're starting to work potentially in that sprint framework if you are working with Scrum, or even Kanban teams who are working maybe in a more first in, first out style here. Really, at this level is where we start to get that predictability. How much work can we do in a certain time frame by this team? That feeds up into the predictability of our work, all the way up that hierarchy into our strategy level as well. You see down here in blue, we have these various time boxes. Strategic snapshot is just how we represent a multi-year period in Jira Align, how we can compare strategy year over year. We have that idea of quarterly or program increment, and then we have our sprints and releases referred to as anchors here. We also have various business vectors that plug into each of these levels. Some really popular ones to work with are the OKRs. There's some high-level budgeting information that we'll see an example of in just a moment. So a little bit more information about Jira Align. It does have 2 editions currently, Standard and Enterprise. The Standard option is going to be going away in the near future. The Enterprise tier, though, we do see that being opted for more frequently because it comes with a sandbox environment, which is incredibly powerful to have. There is an add-on for Jira Align called Enterprise Insights. This is a very powerful add-on. It is a data lake that allows you to connect Jira Align to any of your BI tools, such as Power BI, Tableau, or even Atlassian Analytics, if you have the enterprise tier of Atlassian cloud products. Just some new updates and some upcoming updates from Atlassian. They are pouring a lot of effort into Jira Align. We're seeing really great updates from the development team. They have launched their new navigation UI that you'll see when I get into the tool in just a moment. Some new experiences around OKRs. They continue to update their API and their connector between Jira and Jira Align, as well as the Azure DevOps connector as well. They've rolled out some new functionality around forecasting by feature and capacity planning, and they've also been working to deprecate unused modules to help clean up the tool, make it really efficient for people to get to the modules that they are interested in. And a common question we get when we start talking about these concepts is, okay, you've told me a lot of great things about Jira Align, who it's meant for, how we might use it, and how our teams are represented in the tool. How do we actually implement this tool? And what I have on the screen here is really the standard implementation process for whatever partner you work with. You typically go through a 3 to 6 month process to launch your first program or team of teams level. And as we'll see when we get into the tool, we like to start at this level because that's where our data really lives. We need our teams to be working efficiently in the tools in order to roll up that data to the top levels of the tool. We typically go through some standard phases. We go through planning, discovery, configuration, training, and then we like to launch around a PI planning ceremony. Once we go through that, we of course want to be iterating, cleaning up anything that isn't working for the teams, and then we can start expanding into additional programs and potentially upwards in that hierarchy into our portfolios as well. Really quick before we get into Jira Align, if at this point you're thinking Jira Align might not be the next step for you, I want to talk about Atlassian's other tool, Advanced Roadmaps. And why I like talking about Advanced Roadmaps in this webinar is because I think it is a real stepping stone to getting into Jira Align. As the name suggests, it is a road mapping tool that can be used to help scale, and it's now included in Jira Cloud Premium or Enterprise instances, as well as Jira Data Center instances. This is a tool that's really great for growing Agile organizations that need visibility, shared focus, and accurate delivery. It allows you to plan across multiple teams and align your work to a higher level. As you'll see today, Jira Align does have more robust capabilities around the higher level planning, but if you're just getting started in your scaled journey, advanced roadmaps can be really helpful. And even if you're already in Jira Align, advanced roadmaps still may be helpful for your teams who are working primarily in Jira software. We do have another free webinar that does a deeper look into advanced roadmaps and also discusses Jira Align briefly. It's called our Project Portfolio or Management or PPM with Atlassian webinar. I believe Kylie will throw a link to that in the chat. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and do some of the fun stuff here and jump into Jira Align. Let me get out of this and get into the tool. All right, and this is what Jira Align looks like. This is the new user interface. It is going to be fully rolled out over the next couple of months, but I've heard really great feedback from our customers on this, saying that it's really improved the navigation of the tool. The look and feel is much fresher and aligns with a lot of Atlassian's other cloud products, so lots of great feedback here. Where I've landed is on the homepage. This is a new piece of the tool as well. If you've seen previous demos, this may not have been enabled just yet, but it's a great place for each user to understand where they recently have been and to also favorite or star various pages to easily navigate to them as well. And what I want to just briefly discuss is how we can navigate the tool. I think it's helpful because this is an introduction to Jira Align webinar, but I also think you will start to see how those layers of scale that I mentioned in those slides really come into play in the tool. We navigate Jira Align primarily using our navigation bar at the top here. And what you'll start to see are some of those terms that I mentioned on that hierarchy slide. We have our enterprise, our portfolio, our program, our team, and even our product areas that we can jump into. Each of these areas has a drop-down menu where you can choose the specific entity you're looking for. So here I can see my strategic snapshots that apply to my enterprise tier. If I click on portfolio, I'm going to see, you guessed it, the portfolios and programs, etc. I'm going to be showing various modules at each tier, so you'll see me jumping around this quite a bit. Continuing let's go ahead and jump into the enterprise tier actually. So I'm just going to click on where I want to go, my strategy for 2024. Once you click into one of these tiers, there's going to be a sidebar on the left-hand side. If you're familiar with Jira or Confluence Cloud, very similar to those tools. This is where you can jump to various modules. So there's lots of different options here. And at the top, you will see a filter for you. This is based on time. So these are your program increments. So when you are navigating to these various modules below this field, you are going to filter that module based on the entity that you selected in the top navigation panel and that PI or time box that you selected on the left-hand panel, allowing you to really dig down into the specific information you're looking for. Just talking a little bit more about navigation, a couple things I like to point out, continuing on this bar at the top here. You can easily access those starred items that you have starred, so you can easily find where you want to be. You can quickly jump to various grids, so to view all of a specific work item. You can always create a work item directly here. Of course, depending on your permissions in the tool will determine what you can actually create and view here. Continuing down, there is a search bar, so you are able to search for specific work items. There are in-app notifications. This currently doesn't connect with other Atlassian cloud tools, but there are lots of notifications for Jira Align that you can view here. You can implement checklists in the tool. This is a great way to just, at a high level, implement your process within the tool, give guidance to your users of what modules you want them to be using for different processes. And my personal favorite button to talk about is the help button. And that is because in Jira Align, this button is a contextual help button, meaning when you click it, it's going to show you the documentation for the specific module you're viewing. This is incredibly helpful, I think, to both new and experienced users in Jira Align. It works across every module. It works on reports, telling you what data goes into those reports, how you can interpret it. And it even works on administrative screens. So if anyone watching is an admin, you can click this when you're on those admin screens as well and get more information. All right. Now let's go ahead and jump into some more specific modules in Jira Align. And I like to split this into really two overarching uses of Jira Align: our strategic top-down planning and our visualization of work in progress as it rolls up from, again, that Agile team level up into our higher levels of scale. As I go through this, I am going to hit some highlights of the tool. You will see there are lots of other modules available in Jira Align. It really is a large tool, and talking about all of them in an hour, I'm just going to say is impossible. Maybe someone can do it, but I don't know that it'd be that valuable for you. So what I've chosen to focus on are really those areas of the tool that we see being very beneficial to people when they first get into Jira Align, and even as they mature in Jira Align, those crowd favorites where we find being really beneficial to people, to organizations utilizing this tool. All right, talking about our top-down planning first. I'm going to go ahead and stay here in the enterprise level, and let's talk about the view I'm looking at right now. This is called the strategy room. And this is where at this highest level of scale, that enterprise tier, we are able to start to get some insights into how we are executing against our strategy, how we are rolling up this work. Right here, we're able to show our mission, vision, and values, what is driving us as an organization. And if we scroll down, you'll see our strategy pyramid. This is a very popular image. If you've ever seen anything about Jira Align, you've probably seen this one. But this is how we can start to see how many long-term goals do we have, how many long-term strategy, et cetera. And a lot of the terminology here is customizable. So if this terminology you think doesn't fit for you, you can actually customize quite a bit of this from the admin perspective. Let's look at the right-hand side here. We can start to see our execution against our outcomes. How are we going at completing these work items, and how do they relate to our various levels of objectives? You can kind of see here on the strategy pyramid, we have our work items that we discussed previously, our themes, epics, and features. And at each of those layers, we also have objectives that can apply. And so we can start to really track that overall, what are we trying to accomplish from a strategy perspective, and how are we executing that with our work items here? Can also see this snapshot progress over on the right. Again, a high level roll up going all the way down into our team level at the story level here. So again, looking at our execution rolling up into our strategy. And those OKRs are often of real importance here at the highest level. So you have a heat map telling you how you are going at completing those objectives and key results, and even a tree so you can start to dig down into them. So you can see that high level strategy and what lower level objectives link up into those. Really, overall, the strategy room is where we can start to easily see and analyze our progress and how it is rolling up to that very top of the organization. Now let's go ahead and jump into thinking of our planning process, our backlog. And you can actually access the backlog at any layer of scale. And all of our work items really have a backlog. Excuse me. This is jumping me into that epic backlog, and really the backlog works how you would expect. It's where we can view the essentially list of work items that we are interested in viewing. We are able to rank our work items here by dragging and dropping. We can expand a work item, see its child items. So here we have our epic, and then we have all of our child features below that. We can do a bit of customization and customize what columns we are viewing here, apply filters, and really get the specific slice of data we are looking for. You can even apply a PI in that left-hand panel to filter down work items specific to an individual program increment as well. So as you're going into that PI planning or pre-PI planning process, you can really narrow down the work that you are interested in. Let's go ahead and open up one of these epics just to give you a quick overview so you can start to see what a work item looks like in Jira Align. The epics really have the most data that we can collect, and that's really in line with a lot of frameworks. This is where we are doing a lot of our minimum viable product work, trying to prove out our hypothesis. Is this worth investing in? We are doing some high-level budgeting at this level, and maybe even doing some forecasting at this level as well. And that is all what you can see here on this epic. I'm not going to walk through every single field, but you can start to get a glimpse of the information that we're really trying to collect here. At the bottom of any of our work items, we are going to also see any of our child work items. So thinking of that hierarchy, we're going to see those child features. So you can really land on one work item and start to work up and down that hierarchy. And scrolling back up on the right here, we even start to see, again, thinking of linking our execution up to our strategy, we are seeing our progress in story points. That is looking all the way down through this epic's child features into the team level, tracking the story points that we have planned and accepted so far, giving us that idea of progress here. So really relying on that hierarchy that we carry out through linking to give us insight into how are we actually going at completing this epic, a real insight into that progress here. Jumping to a couple of these other tabs, we can create an intake form, collect what data we want to collect when we first create this epic. We can jump to the spin tab here. Jira Align isn't intended to be your budgetary tool of record, but you can glean a lot of information on how you're tracking with your overall budget. You can apply a budget to each of your epics. You can start to see your forecasted, estimated, and accepted spend. This tab always gets people really interested in Jira Align and what it can help us with, but I always like to make the call out that all of these numbers really hinge on us executing well at our team level. And that's why when we implement Jira Align, we like to start at that team of teams level. When you see something like accepted spend, you'll notice right under it, it says by stories. So to get this data, we actually need our teams to be creating their work, planning their work into sprints if they're Scrum teams, estimating their work, often in story points, but could also be in time as well, and linking that work up to those parent features. This is going to help us in finally completing their work, moving it through the workflow. Once they start doing that regularly is when we can start to glean insights like our accepted spend. It's going to be taking a lot of various calculations to complete this. And Jira Align is really transparent about what those calculations are. You can actually click into any of these and start to do a drill down. And anytime you hover over any of these, click on it now, numbers, it starts to show you that actual calculation here as well. And it's also well documented in their documentation. So lots of great information here. Let's click on the forecast tab as well. PI by PI, you can apply forecasting. You can go program by program or even down to team by team to start to get that idea of what teams are going to be working on this epic and how much effort we expect from them. And this can help with your overall planning. And it also feeds into that forecasted spend calculation as well. All right. That's enough about epics. Lots of great information that we can start to collect and will play into a lot of reports. With this backlog module, like I mentioned, you can start to you can see the backlog for any of our work item levels. So we can toggle right here to jump into our feature backlog, for example. And it works the exact same, which I really love. You can just learn the same set of skills and then work with what layer you are interested in. All of those features I just talked about are the exact same. Let's go ahead and open up that feature. A little bit less data here, but really features are often a little bit less robust. Oops, looks like that one's been deleted for some reason. Interesting. Really, they are intended to be completed by a single team of teams and within a single PI. So this is where we're going to fill in that information, and we're going to start linking those stories to this feature to start getting that roll up of data at that higher epic level and up into that enterprise level as well. All right. As we're continuing to talk about planning, let's actually jump into our program level here. And I'm going to search for my mobile program, and I want to talk about the program board. The program board is one of my favorite things to talk about in Jira Align because I think it is one of the areas where you start to see immediate value when you actually start working with it. This, what you're seeing, is the program room. I'm going to come back to that. It's also a crowd pleaser. I'm going to jump down to the program board here. And the program board really isn't anything new. It is a common planning strategy. It's really a grid. It is made up of our rows, which represent our teams, and our columns, which represent our sprints within our program increment. And it's used by these teams to start planning out their features. And it will also show us our dependencies and objectives and indicate when we have, open risks as well. What's really powerful about this program board, though, is that it's a real-time report. So it is going to be powerful for your teams within the PI planning process, but it goes beyond that. Historically, we would use this board with a bunch of sticky notes and string, and that's really great. It's an excellent tool for planning within these program increments. But where Jira Align takes it a step further is that information doesn't go stale. It's not up on a whiteboard that we either have to manually update or, let's be honest, we just kind of leave it there and hope that we are executing against it well. It is here and it is live. So as we are actually going through time in our program increment, it's going to start showing us where we're falling behind. It's going to start showing us also where we are doing really great. So this goes beyond that PI planning process and starts to be this real-time report. And as we are implementing at that team of teams level, this is an immediate value added to organizations, is what I really find. Let's go ahead and walk through it just a little bit. Here we see again our teams. We see our program or our sprints and our program increments. This can be viewed for more than one program and more than one PI at a time if you need to. In fact, I think I am viewing multiple programs here. Yep, here's my AI program and my mobile program that I'm looking for. Ooh. There we go. And then it's made up of a bunch of symbols. There are a couple of different views that do allow you to view more information, so don't be hesitant to utilize this. There's also a great legend in the top right corner that tells you what every shape, symbol, and color you are viewing mean. At a high level, when we're talking about our rectangles here, we're really talking about our features. And often when you go through the PI planning process, these features are going to show up mostly in this unplanned sprint column. And this is where we can actually add in teams that are going to be working on this feature, and we are able to assign it to a sprint. And this is what moves that feature across our program board. So let's move this to sprint 28, for example. You can see a lot of information about our feature here, what stories are linked to it, what dependencies are linked to it, etc. Our features will then display on all of the rows for the teams that are participating in it, allowing them to carry out their planning separately and really indicate when their team is going to be complete. You'll notice when you hover over any work item, it also shows you what other work items it's related to, other views or other teams that are working on this feature. If it is linked to a dependency, you will see that. Dependencies are represented as these little plus, cross, Chevy icons, whatever you want to call this icon here, and even linked to objectives, which are represented in the top row up here as well. You'll also notice a lot of color coding. The program board is going to start to show you these different colors based on potential planning errors. I like to apply stoplight mentality here. Gray, blue, green, we're doing good. Red, yellow, orange, we maybe have a planning error that we need to look into. These are set in the system. We can't configure the errors, but I find them to be really accurate to what we would really be caring about when we're talking about a program board. And I agree with the severity that they will rank these in as well. When you click on a red or orange or yellow item, any of those planning issues are going to be identified at the top here in that severity order. So you can see there's actually 3 for this item. It's blocked. We have some stories that are not assigned to any sprints, and we have some open risks for this feature as well. When you're going through that PI planning process, you can use these indicators as areas we maybe need to shape up our planning. And then as we go through the PI, again, it's a real-time report. So if we aren't completing work in the sprint that we were expecting to complete it in, it is going to throw an error for us. So you can see here that the dependency is not done past its commit date. So again, I'm going to get off my soapbox about the program board. I think it's a really excellent tool, and it's immediately valuable when we implement Jira Align. All right, we are doing good on time. So let's go ahead and talk about a couple other work items that really go into the planning process. As we have talked about here, this program board also shows us dependencies. Jira Align does have a dependency management module, and I'm going to navigate to it now. Dependencies are really that handshake between teams that a team needs help or work delivered by a different team to actually complete their work. And we always like to say, begin your dependencies with a conversation. There are notifications around dependencies, but let's have a conversation. Make sure that we're working with the correct team, and make sure that we're giving them all the information they need, and then we can put it into a tool like Jira Align. It really is a common struggle that we hear organizations mention when they're evaluating a tool like Jira Align, that it's a challenge for them to really understand, coordinate, and track across teams and those dependencies across teams. And so features like this are super useful. It gives you an overview of what dependencies are needed, what teams are associated, who needs the who's requesting the dependency, who does it depend on, when is it needed by. Let's go ahead and open up one right here. It actually has its own workflow that you can see of not committed, committed, and done. You can unblock and unblock these dependencies as well. You can set a needed by date and a committed by date. And all of this is also visible over on that program board as well. You can link these to features. So when we're planning our features, which feature does this relate to? And then you can link stories to it as well. So right from this dependency, you can see that this is needed so that the Tiger team is able to complete feature 1, 2, 3, and the Baltimore team is going to execute these stories to complete this work. So that handshake is really right here in the tool. There's also some great visualizations around this. They moved how you can actually get to this. So let me go back to the previous menu and go to reports here. And let's find that dependency matrix here. A couple of my favorites, you can start to use visualizations like this one to understand where your dependencies are actually living. And where we have a high number of them, maybe there's some communication we can have around, can we reevaluate our teams to start making them more efficient and lower these handoffs, which ultimately lower or extend our time to market typically. I really love to talk about how Jira Align has a lot of, identifies a lot of communication moments. It's not necessarily going to solve every problem under the sun, but it's going to show you where those problems are and help guide that conversation for you. Jira Align also has a risk management module. So as you are going through that PI planning process, if you utilize that Roam process, you are able to add those risks into the tool and then visualize them on a report like this, understanding how you're actually roaming them, what category you're putting them in, and start to utilize this even during your PI planning process to roam them together. So here's just a high level look at what a risk looks like, a lot of information you can collect. And then you'll see these as they are linked to features on the program board. If they are open risks, they will turn that feature yellow. All right. And let me go back to the previous menu here. Let's also just talk a little bit about those objectives. So objectives are often a part of PI planning, or you may be working with objectives and key results outside of the PI planning process. Jira Align supports both of those ideas, and it has great visualizations around objectives as well. So this is that OKR hub where we can start to see what our objectives are, what our key results are, and how we are tracking against them. So let me just open one up here. Again, the idea here is that that objective is the what are we trying to accomplish as an organization. And as we are talking about our key results, that's how are we going to accomplish this? And we're able to track both here. And then with these key results, we can go through what we call a check-in process. And so we're able to set a goal and then check in periodically at how we're going at achieving that goal. And each key result is given a score. It's a 0 to 1 score, so 0 to 100%. And then it gives us that objective score. And you can see this all throughout Jira Align. If you think back to that strategy room we talked about, when we talked about that OKR heat map, it's looking at the average score of our objectives at those various levels. So portfolio, program, team, etc. So these are fairly flexible. They can really be applied to whatever process you are following with objectives. And Atlassian is pouring a lot into the objectives. I think they're a really big focus industry-wide. And so there's a lot of great work going into these objectives and how we can visualize them in Jira Align. All right. Really quickly, I want to just mention a little bit more about Valiantis and some upcoming opportunities around Jira Align. And then we're going to jump back in and talk a little bit more about that idea of rolling up data from the team level up to our top layers of scale and how we can visualize that more. All right, as I mentioned, Valiantis is a platinum solutions partner with Atlassian. We offer a lot of services around training. We have a lot of free training opportunities like the one you're attending now, as well as paid training opportunities. We also have a lot of services around consulting and even custom development. We do have a division of our company that is a full stack development team. So anytime we aren't able to solve your need directly in the Atlassian ecosystem, we can help create a custom tool to solve your need as well. We do have, I believe, just about, if not all, of the Atlassian certifications and do have a global presence. So wherever you are located, we have a team that can help you. An upcoming opportunity around Jira Align specifically, we do have a Jira Align bootcamp course. This is really to get a hands-on experience with Jira Align if you are interested in it. And I realize I didn't update this slide. The next class, I believe, is in April, and I think Kylie's going to throw a link to that in the chat, and this QR code will take you to that page as well. Again, this is really for organizations that are evaluating Jira Align, and you want to get some hands-on experience experience in the tool. We go a little bit deeper basically into all the topics we've talked about here today. So if you're interested in that, there is a promo code VAL20 that you can use to get 20% off. And again, there's a link in the chat. I want to say the next one, it's in April. I want to say the 14th, but the link in the chat will tell you for sure. All right, let's go ahead and jump back into our Jira Align demo. So we've talked a lot about our planning, how we can plan at the various levels of scale, the modules that help us with that, how we can work with our dependencies, risks, and objectives. And now let's talk a little bit more about our visualization of work. So once we plan this work and we start executing on it, what can we use to actually understand how we're executing? And we've talked a couple of topics that actually play into this, like our program board and that strategy room. But let's do a deeper dive into some other areas that are super useful for this. In this example, we are assuming that those teams are really utilizing Jira and they are utilizing the out-of-the-box reports on their boards, dashboards, etc., to really understand their work. So let's go ahead and start here at those higher levels of scale, starting with the program area where we are already at. And I want to talk about the program room. You saw a flash of this previously. Whenever you navigate to the various areas of scale, it's going to land you in the room for that area. And really, rooms you can think of as just a dashboard for that tier. So we saw the strategy room, and now here's the room for the program level. And again, what this allows us to do is start to get that idea of how we are executing the work associated with a program increment. I actually also see this room being utilized during PI planning as well. And it's really quite useful in a lot of ceremonies you might go throughout your program increment as you're doing that, sync of your teams, whether it's PO sync, art sync, or if you call it a different name, when you're trying to have that meeting that you're like looking at how all of these teams are doing in the PI, this can be a really helpful visualization. It starts off by giving us just some quick statistics, how many features, story points, etc. have we planned. It then lets us understand our load versus our velocity. And if we are overloaded, there's a good chance we're not going to complete that work. This is an extreme example of overloading here. We can then break it down into our team load. So you're able to understand how each team is going about completing their work. You can actually planning their work. You can hover over this to see the specific numbers that play into this percentage. And then once we start going, this team load widget is really going to be quite useful during that planning process. And then this team progress widget shows you the reverse. How are we going at completing what we've loaded up here? And in comparison to where we are in time, how is this? If we're close to done with our PI, and then 80s and 90% is great. If we are at the very end of the PI and we're seeing really low percentages here, that's where we want to start paying attention. We can see our dependencies right here, as well as I'll jump over to this other side, our risks and objectives. We can implement a planning checklist that can be useful for that PI planning process or even pre-PI planning process. We can see a quick overview of our sprints and how we're going at completing our work in each sprint here. We have a glimpse of our backlog. Even you can't do your ranking here, but you can start to see the features and what stories roll up into those features directly here. And lastly, on the right-hand side, I have this progress as well. What's really great is in this view, you can also use these team icons at the top to filter the view for a specific team. So I often see in those ceremonies where you're trying to go team by team, we might look at how are we doing as a program or a release train overall, and then how is each individual team doing? And that Scrum Master or product owner of the team may give a report and utilize a view like this. So again, a really great view for understanding how are we going at completing this work. Let's take it up a level and jump into our portfolio tier. And we have a room at the portfolio tier as well. What's great about the room at the portfolio tier is we can actually view this for one or multiple program increments. So I'm just going to make some selections of some additional program increments here and start to get that multi-PI view. When we're talking about that portfolio level, we're of course talking a little bit more about our themes and our epics, but we are caring about how we are executing on those. So again, looking all the way down into that team level. We start to get an idea of our progress for each theme here, what we have scoped out versus what we have accepted, our overall PI roadmap, how we're going at completing the work in each PI. We again have a little bit of a mini backlog here for our features and our epics. And then we have our progress per each PI. So for each program in each PI within our portfolio, how are they doing? There's even other tabs to the program room, so we can view the resources tab to start to get an idea of our effort versus distribution. We get a little bit more information in this middle tab here. And then we can go to our financials as well. And it gives us some quick links to our investment versus spend report. How are we going at budgeting on each of our themes? How is the cost of our PI that we are executing and planning, etc. So lots of really great information here in the program room. I also want to briefly talk about the product module. So the product module does not have to be implemented. It's not a necessary piece of the hierarchy. What it is really a cross-cutting slice. So if you are wanting to identify various products that multiple programs, multiple teams may be executing against and get that kind of cross-cutting view of information, the product room may be useful, or the product module may be useful for you. So I just want to give a glimpse of what that product room really looks like. And we'll let it load here. All right. Oh, interesting. Let me remove my PIs that I have selected. See if that loads our data a little bit better. There we go. So within the product module, you can create personas, you can create objectives for your product. You can start to understand your effort versus value. It looks like we could do that. This would be for the themes that are linked. I'm not quite sure why that's not loading, but we have our theme effort distribution. We start to see those features that are linked to those to our product. We can even see our effort distribution chart here. So a bit more information that you're able to visualize about, again, that kind of cross-cutting slice that may be pulling in features from multiple programs, for example, to deliver this product. All right. Let's go ahead and talk about our reports as well. Let me go back to our program tier here. Each tier of Jira Align has some reports associated with it, and there are lots and lots of reports available. I always like to mention that the reports in Jira Align aren't all created equal. You may find some more valuable than others, and the next customer may find different ones valuable. So I always like to recommend, think of what metrics are important to you and your organization and your leadership, and then start to explore the reports that may fit those metrics, and encourage people to star those, disable the ones that are not useful for your organization. You can actually disable really any of the modules. So really focusing on the ones that are most important to you is our recommendation always, but especially when you're first implementing the tool, making it really helpful and easy for people to navigate to what they need to be paying attention to. Under each level of scale, you can go to the reports menu here and start to see all of the various reports that are available. So let's see. Let me find the scope change report. That's a great one. Program increment scope change. You can click on any of these reports and it's going to load. Again, remembering that our reports are filtered based on the program or portfolio we selected and the PI we have selected on the left-hand side. And this is going to start to give you an overview of that information. So this one is specifically our scope change for our PI, giving us some information of how many story points did we start this PI with, how many have we added since we started the PI, removed since we started the PI, and a breakdown of that information as well. Always keep in mind that help button does apply to reports, so it does show you a lot of information about the report. This is super useful when you're starting to explore those reports, understanding really what data goes into this, what do you need to have in place, prerequisites for the report, and how you can interpret the report as well. All right. So that really wraps up the main content. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and that is what we're going to talk about next. And really quickly, I will go ahead and throw up this slide here. I'll throw up the Jira Align Bootcamp slide so you can access that as well. All right. Let's go ahead and jump into these questions, and I'll also throw in a couple of frequently asked questions as well. A very relevant question since we just talked about reports. How customizable are reports in Jira Align? In Jira Align, the reports are not necessarily configurable, but what you can do is really alter what data it is showing you by using those different contexts. So choosing different programs and teams and different program increments to get the slice of data that you are looking for. Some visualizations like your backlog and your grids, you can also update what data it is showing you in the columns. Your objective tree that we looked at, you can update the columns as well. If you're looking for fully customized reports, then that is where that Enterprise Insights add-on really comes into play. We do find that most organizations that really utilize Jira Align also need Enterprise Insights, and that allows you again to plug your Jira Align data into a BI tool of your choice and start to create those custom reports, get custom slices of data that you need, custom visualizations that you and your leadership may need as well. All right. Something that we commonly hear is how good is Jira Align at catching errors? And Jira Align actually has quite a lot of functionality around that. So I'm going to switch back to the tool. And let's go ahead and go back to that program board. So first, when we're talking about our planning, we talked a lot about the program board and the various planning errors. So this is a great place when you're doing that planning going into a program increment and you start to see errors around, we don't have stories linked to features. We don't have stories planned into sprints. Those are really important errors to pay attention to so you can try and get ahead of them from that planning perspective. There's also a couple of other visualizations that can help with this. When we talk about our backlog, one of the modules that is really powerful is this orphan objects option. And what this does is it starts to show you for your program and your program increment really where you have data missing. And so it's going to show you where you don't have features linked up to a parent epic, where you don't have an estimate on your features, etc. And you can start to expand these to see those, and you can even make updates right here in this module. This is a great thing to check before you go into that PI planning event, making sure we have everything linked how we need it to be. Again, that linking of the hierarchy is what really lets us get great value out of those upper levels. So making sure we're linking our features up to parent work items. And then as we go through that PI planning process, utilizing the backlog or that program board to understand where we maybe need to make sure we're getting all the way down to that execution layer. And then in the program room, there's also a great example of this in that feature module that's in the middle of the program room. Let me just get a bit more screen real estate here. In this area, if you scroll down, it also shows you misaligned stories here, and it will show you orphan stories as well. So stories that don't have a parent, or misaligned stories, which is that these stories are planned for a sprint outside of the PI that the parent feature is planned for. A really great error to catch. So understanding that we are wanting to complete all the stories linked to a feature within the PI that the feature is assigned to. So this is saying, well, you're not going to do that because you have these stories planned outside of that PI. So a lot of great areas. Again, I think Jira Align is really excellent at showing us these communication moments where we have something that's not quite right in our data, and we want to make sure we're fixing that going into our planning, into our execution of this work. All right. Someone is saying we already have Jira Align, but we missed some opportunities in our rollout. We feel like we aren't doing great with things like tracking dependencies. Can we just start doing that now? Absolutely. Jira Align is, or implementing Jira Align is a process, and it is an iterative process. Again, we like to start with an MVP, establishing what modules we want to start using, what process we want to start implementing, and really focusing on that MVP to get people utilizing the tools and then growing from there. Dependencies are often something that might be a day two thing that we work on. We implement, we start tracking our features, working with our sprints, and then we start working with dependencies. So within the administrative settings, again, you can disable really any module, any report that isn't valuable to your organization. And when we work with customers, we always like to start talking about what is that MVP and what can we turn off to not distract our users when they're in the tool because we aren't really using that process just yet. Then we want to enable those features when we want to start carrying out that process. And what I can't recommend enough is to write down your process and share it. Make sure that everyone has access to it. Do some training on it. Whether you use a partner like Valiantus or you have great trainers at your organization, train people on it and then guide them through that process. You can start using really any of this at any time. What I always recommend starting with is making sure we're getting our work into the tool, we're linking that work, we're estimating that work, and we're moving it through the workflow. And while that might sound really easy, it isn't always. And sometimes it's a big ask to train people on that and to really get them moving in that direction. And so start there and grow as it works for your organization. All right. One last question I think we have time for. Looking at the program board, it seemed really overwhelming. Do teams actually use this functionality? Yes, teams really do use the program board functionality. Whoa, if I can read, I would click on it. It can be overwhelming at first, but a couple of things to help you along the way. Look into the different views of the program board. So here under this little button, you can choose the normal view, which starts to show you more information. It makes it a really big screen, which is hard to demo, which is why I use the small view, but you can get more information here. Utilizing the legend is super helpful, and also working with the extra configs potentially, making sure we have the right things turned on and turned off for our teams can be really useful. It does take some time, but I find that teams really do adapt to adapt to this tool quite quickly and really start to get the jive of it. All right, looks like we have a couple more questions. I think we have a couple more minutes. I've heard XVM say that in the past, Jira Align is appropriate for organizations with 500 developers or more. Is that still correct? Yes, that is still correct. That is the metric that Atlassian puts out. It's not a harsh number. I have seen organizations with less utilize the tool. It's really, if it is a lot of times when you get lower than that, it might be too large of a tool. Something like advanced roadmaps may be a better fit. And of course, the price point is priced at for organizations that are large enterprises. And so sometimes that may be a consideration as well. But that is the metric that Atlassian does put out. Are there any specific differences between Jira Align for cloud versus data center? No, I think you're talking about syncing Jira Align with a cloud versus data center instance of Jira software. No, there are no significant differences. It really collects the same data and the data syncs the same for those tools. So when it comes to the connection with a cloud or data center site, the data you get is the same. I will say the initial setup of that connector is a little bit more involved whenever you're talking data center, because you have to kind of get around your company's hosting policies, your firewalls, things like that to get that initial connection. So that can sometimes take a little bit more time, but once you get it connected, it really is the same. All right. Thanks everyone for attending, and thank you for your great questions. Of course, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Please feel free to connect on LinkedIn and ask questions, send us an email, etc. Kylie threw my email there in the chat. So thank you very much for attending, and have a great rest of your day.